The suspects were locked inside. The victim was locked inside. Even the dogs were locked inside. The Kennel Murder Case wasn't just a murder mystery, it was a 73-minute sprint through impossible geometry, where every door was bolted, every window sealed, and somehow a man ended up dead with a bullet that never got fired. The police called it suicide. Philo Vance called it Tuesday. These are 20 weird facts about the Kennel Murder Case. And the bonus? There's a remake so forgotten. Even the studio pretended it never existed, locked the door. This case doesn't play fair. Number 1. Before William Powell became the smooth-talking detective in a tailored suit, the role of Philo Vance was a revolving door of Hollywood leading men. Paramount had started the series in 1929 with William Powell in The Kennel Murder Case, and he was perfect, sophisticated, witty, exactly what author S.S. Van Dyne had imagined. But then Powell left Paramount for Warner Brothers, and the studio panicked. They tried Basil Rathbone, they tried Warren William, they cycled through actors like suspects in a lineup, each one bringing their own energy, but none of them clicked the way Powell did. So, when Warner Brothers got their hands on the property for The Kennel Murder Case, they knew exactly who to call. Powell didn't hesitate. He said yes, slipped back into Vance's shoes like he'd never left, and delivered what many critics still call the definitive Philo Vance performance. The role wasn't just his, he owned it. And in 1933, with The Kennel Murder Case, he proved that some characters only have one true face, no matter how many times studios try to recast them. Powell wasn't playing Philo Vance, he was Philo Vance, and everyone else was just borrowing the name. Number 2. Michael Curtis was a madman with a camera. By 1933, he'd already directed over 40 films, bouncing between genres like a man possessed. Warner Bros. Loved him because he worked fast, didn't complain, and made every frame count. But The Kennel Murder Case gave him something different to play with, a locked room mystery that had to feel both claustrophobic and cinematic. Curtis didn't just point the camera and shoot dialogue. He turned the apartment into a maze. He used Dutch angles, low shots, shadows creeping across walls like accusatory fingers. He moved the camera through doorways, down hallways, making the space itself feel alive and hostile. And he did it all in under 3 weeks. Warner Brothers gave him a tight schedule and a tighter budget, and Curtis responded by making one of the most visually inventive detective films of the decade. He treated the mystery like a thriller, cutting fast, never letting the audience settle, building tension in scenes where people were just standing around talking. Other directors would film a murder mystery like a stage play. Curtis filmed it like a horror movie. And that energy, that refusal to let the pacing sag, turned what could have been a talky courtroom drama into something electric, unpredictable, and relentlessly watchable. Number 3. The movie runs 73 minutes. That's barely longer than a modern TV episode, but inside that runtime, Curtis crammed an entire novel's worth of plot, suspects, red herrings, clues, and reversals. Most detective films from the era moved slowly, letting scenes breathe, giving audiences time to think. Not The Kennel Murder Case. It moves like a bullet train. Characters deliver exposition while walking through rooms. Clues get dropped in throwaway lines. Suspects appear, get interrogated, and disappear before you've even learned their names. Some critics at the time complained it was too fast, that you needed to see it twice just to follow the logic. But that was the point. Curtis and screenwriters Robert N. Lee and Peter Milne weren't interested in hand-holding. They trusted the audience to keep up or get left behind, and if you did keep up, the payoff was worth it. The film never stops moving, never wastes a frame, never lets you catch your breath. It's the cinematic equivalent of a magician doing a card trick so fast you're not sure if you saw the sleight of hand or imagined it. And when the final reveal comes, you realize every single moment mattered, even the ones you thought were just filler, because in The Kennel Murder Case, nothing was filler. It was all evidence. You just didn't know it yet. Number 4. Mary Astor was already a star when she signed on for The Kennel Murder Case, but her role as Hilda Lake wasn't meant to be memorable. She was the love interest, the woman caught between loyalty and suspicion, beautiful but distant. On paper, it was thankless. A few scenes, a couple of close-ups, nothing that would challenge her, but Astor didn't phone it in. She played Hilda with quiet devastation, her eyes doing the work her dialogue couldn't. And she did it while navigating one of the strangest dynamics in 1930s Hollywood. William Powell, her co-star, was her ex-husband. They'd been married briefly in the late 1920s, divorced in 1930, and now here they were, 3 years later, playing lovers in a murder mystery. The tension wasn't scripted, but it was there. You can see it in their scenes together, the way they hold each other's gaze just a second too long, the way Astor's voice softens when she says his name. It's not quite longing, not quite regret, just something unresolved hanging in the air between them. Curtis never acknowledged it, but he didn't have to. The camera caught it anyway, and in a film full of locked rooms and hidden motives, the most compelling mystery might have been the one happening off-screen between two actors who once promised to love each other forever, and were now just trying to remember their lines. Number 5. The locked room mystery is one of the oldest tricks in detective fiction. A body, a sealed space, no way in or out. It's a puzzle designed to break your brain, and S.S. Van Dyne knew it. His novel, The Kennel Murder Case, was built around the impossibility of the crime, and when Warner Brothers adapted it, they had to make the audience believe the room was truly locked, so they didn't fake it. Production designer Jack O'Keefe built the apartment set with real doors, real windows, real locks. When William Powell's Philo Vance examines the crime scene, he's not acting. He's actually checking the mechanisms, turning handles, testing latches, seeing if there's any way someone could have gotten in. And Curtis filmed it all in long, unbroken takes to prove there were no tricks, no hidden edits, no cinematic sleight of hand. The room was locked. The windows were sealed. The balcony door was bolted from the inside. It wasn't just set dressing. It was architecture that had to hold up under scrutiny, and it did. So well that even modern viewers watching the film 90 years later still pause and rewind, trying to figure out how the killer did it before Vance explains it. Because the brilliance of the Kennel Murder Case wasn't just solving the mystery, it was making you believe the mystery was unsolvable in the first place. Number 6. Eugene Pallette played Sergeant Heath, the gruff, no-nonsense cop who thought Philo Vance was an overeducated nuisance, and in every scene, he looked like he wanted to throw Vance out a window. Pallette had a face like a bulldog and a voice that sounded like gravel in a blender, and he used both to perfection. But behind the scenes, Pallette was miserable, not because of the role, because of the schedule. Curtis worked fast, sometimes shooting 12-hour days, moving from scene to scene without breaks. Pallette, who was in his mid-40s and carrying extra weight, struggled to keep up. He'd sweat through his costume, forget his lines, need multiple takes just to get through a single page of dialogue. And Curtis, who had no patience for delays, would snap at him, push him harder, demand perfection on the first take. Pallette later said it was one of the most exhausting shoots of his career, not because the role was physically demanding, but because Curtis refused to slow down. But the irony is, that exhaustion made the performance better. Sergeant Heath was supposed to be a man at the end of his rope, frustrated, overworked, fed up with wealthy suspects and their alibis. And Pallette didn't have to act tired. He was tired, bone tired, camera tired, Curtis tired. So, when he glares at William Powell, you're not watching Eugene Pallette play Sergeant Heath. You're watching Eugene Pallette survive Michael Curtis. And, somehow, it's perfect. Number 7. The title, The Kennel Murder Case, promised dogs. Lots of dogs, and the film delivered. The opening scene takes place at a dog show, with purebreds strutting around, handlers in crisp uniforms, judges examining paws and teeth. It's all very proper, very civilized, until someone ends up dead. But those dogs weren't actors. They were real show dogs, borrowed from actual breeders for the production. Warner Brothers didn't have the budget to train animals, so they just hired professionals and filmed them doing what they already did. And most of them behaved perfectly, except for one. A Scottish Terrier, supposedly the star of the Kennel Club, refused to cooperate. It barked during takes, lunged at the camera, bit a crew member's ankle, and had to be removed from set after only one day. The production tried to replace it with a look-alike, but the new dog was too calm, too obedient, completely unconvincing as a prize-winning show animal. So, Curtis made a choice. He kept the aggressive dog's footage, even though it only appeared for a few seconds because it had personality. It had energy. It felt real. And in a film where everything else was carefully controlled and staged, That one chaotic terrier brought something unpredictable to the screen. The dog didn't follow the script. It didn't care about its mark. It just existed. Loud and stubborn and completely unmanageable, kind of like the film itself. Number 8. Pre-code. Hollywood was wild. Before the enforcement of the production code in 1934, filmmakers could get away with content that would be banned just a year later. Murder, adultery, sexual innuendo, moral ambiguity, all fair game. And the Kennel Murder Case, released in 1933, walked right up to that line without crossing it. There's a scene where Philo Vance examines a woman's bedroom, and the camera lingers on her silk negligee draped over a chair, her perfume bottles on the dresser, the unmade bed suggesting recent company. It's suggestive without being explicit, intimate without being scandalous. Another scene involves a character who's clearly having an affair, and the film doesn't condemn it or moralize about it. It just presents it as fact, as part of the tangled web of relationships that led to murder. A year later, that kind of content would have been cut, sanitized, or rewritten entirely. But in 1933, Curtis could film it, and Warner Brothers could release it, and audiences could watch it without censors stepping in. The film exists in that brief, strange window where Hollywood could be adult without being punished for it. And you can feel that freedom in the way the characters talk, the way the camera moves, the way the story refuses to tie everything up in a neat moral bow. Because in the Kennel Murder Case, the world isn't clean. People lie, they cheat, they kill, and Philo Vance doesn't judge them. He just solves the puzzle and walks away. Number 9. William Powell didn't just play Philo Vance. He became the template for every smooth-talking detective that followed. His performance in The Kennel Murder Case influenced everyone from Nick Charles in The Thin Man to countless TV detectives decades later. The way he delivered lines, dry, precise, with just a hint of amusement, became the standard. The way he moved through crime scenes, hands in pockets, observing everything, reacting to nothing, became iconic. Powell made detective work look easy, not because Vance was smarter than everyone else, but because he was calmer. He didn't get flustered. He didn't panic. He just looked, thought, and solved. And that calm confidence became his signature. But it almost didn't happen. Powell was struggling with personal issues during filming. His marriage to Carol Lombard was falling apart. He was drinking more than he should. He showed up to set tired, distracted, not fully present. Curtis noticed but didn't intervene. He just kept the cameras rolling, trusting Powell to find the character in the moment. And Powell did. He channeled his own exhaustion, his own detachment, into Philo Vance. The result was a performance that felt effortless, but was actually held together by sheer professionalism. Powell was barely surviving the shoot, but on screen, he looked like the most composed man in the world. And that contradiction, that gap between the actor and the character, made Philo Vance unforgettable. Number 10. Before the final credits rolled, the Kennel Murder Case had already become a phenomenon. Test audiences loved it. Critics praised it. Warner Brothers knew they had a hit. And then something strange happened. The studio started getting letters. Not fan mail, complaints. Viewers who'd seen the film once came back to see it again, armed with notebooks, determined to prove Philo Vance's solution was wrong. They mapped out the apartment, timed the movements, checked the alibis, looking for plot holes. And some of them found inconsistencies, small ones, moments where the timeline didn't quite add up, or a clue appeared too conveniently. Warner Brothers ignored them. Curtis shrugged it off. Because the point wasn't to create a perfect airtight mystery. The point was to create the illusion of one. And for 73 minutes, the illusion held. Even if you went back and studied every frame, even if you found the cracks in the logic, it didn't matter. Because while you were watching, you believed it. You believed the room was locked. You believed the murder was impossible. You believed Philo Vance was the only man who could solve it. And in the end, belief is all a mystery needs. Not perfection, just enough smoke and mirrors to keep you guessing until the final reveal. The Kennel Murder Case wasn't flawless, but it was fast, it was fun, and it made you feel like you were watching a genius at work, even if that genius was just William Powell in a good suit, standing in a locked room, explaining how the impossible became inevitable. Number 11. The film's cinematographer, William Reese, had a problem. Michael Curtis wanted shadows, atmosphere, visual tension. But the apartment set was small, cramped, and filled with actors. There wasn't room for traditional lighting setups, so Reese improvised. He mounted lights on the ceiling, hidden behind molding and fixtures, creating illumination that felt natural but was actually carefully controlled. He used practical lamps in the scenes, letting characters turn them on and off, casting sudden shadows across walls. And in the murder room itself, he positioned a single sea light outside the window, filtering through curtains, giving everything a ghostly, uncertain quality. The result was a film that looked more like German expressionism than a typical Hollywood detective story. Curtis loved it. Warner Brothers didn't. Studio executives wanted brighter, clearer images, something audiences could see without straining. They complained the film was too dark, too moody, too artsy. But by the time they saw the footage, it was too late to reshoot. Reese had already moved on to another production, and Curtis refused to compromise. So the film stayed dark. And years later, critics would point to that visual style as one of the reasons the Kennel Murder Case stood out from other detective films of the era. It didn't look safe, it looked dangerous. And in a locked room mystery where nothing was as it seemed, that darkness became part of the solution. Number 12. Ralph Morgan played the victim, Archer Coe, a man so universally despised that half the cast had a motive to kill him, but Morgan barely appears in the film. He's dead within the first 15 minutes, and most of his screen time consists of other characters talking about how terrible he was. Arrogant, cruel, petty, vindictive. The kind of man who collected enemies like other people collected stamps. Morgan knew his role was thankless. No heroic speeches, no dramatic death scene. Just a corpse in a locked room. But he approached it with complete seriousness. He worked with Curtis to create a backstory for Coe, even though none of it would make it into the script. He figured out how the character moved, how he spoke, what made him hateable. And in the brief moments before his death, Morgan played Coe with such contempt, such casual cruelty, that you understood immediately why someone wanted him dead. It was a master class in economy. Morgan had maybe 5 minutes of actual dialogue, but he created a character so vivid, so thoroughly despicable, that his absence dominated the entire film. Even dead, Archer Coe was the most important person in the room. And Morgan, who could have phoned it in, treated those 5 minutes like they were the performance of his career. Because in a mystery, the victim matters just as much as the detective. And Morgan made sure you'd never forget Archer Coe, even after Philo Vance figured out who killed him. Number 13. The film's score was almost non-existent. In 1933, most movies had wall-to-wall orchestration, music swelling during dramatic moments, underscoring every emotion. But the Kennel Murder Case was different. Long stretches played in complete silence, just dialogue and ambient sound. Footsteps on hardwood floors, doors creaking, the ticking of a clock. Curtis insisted on it. He believed music would distract from the mystery, would telegraph emotions the audience should discover on their own. Warner Brothers fought him. They wanted a traditional score, something to keep audiences engaged during the slower scenes. But Curtis held firm, and eventually the studio gave in, mostly because they were already over budget and didn't want to pay for a composer. The result was unnerving. Scenes that should have felt safe, people standing in drawing rooms having conversations, felt tense because there was no music to tell you how to feel. You listened to every word, watched every gesture, because there was nothing else to focus on. And when music did appear, brief stings during revelations or transitions, it hit harder because you weren't expecting it. Modern audiences, raised on constant soundtracks, sometimes find the silence jarring, but in 1933, it was radical. A detective film that trusted its audience to pay attention without being guided by a score. Just the mystery, the clues, and the silence between them. Number 14. One scene almost ended production. Philo Vance confronts the killer in the final act, and the confrontation was supposed to be quiet, civilized, gentleman against gentleman. But during rehearsal, William Powell suggested something different. What if Vance, usually so controlled, showed real anger? What if the mask slipped, just for a moment? Curtis loved it. They reblocked the scene, adding physical intensity, a moment where Powell grabs the killer, shoves him against a wall. It was brief, maybe 3 seconds, but it changed everything. Suddenly, Vance wasn't just a brain. He was human, capable of rage. They filmed it in one take. Powell went for it completely, and the actor playing the killer, startled by the genuine force, reacted with real fear. It was perfect, and then the studio saw it. Executives hated it. They said it made Vance look unstable, violent, out of character. They wanted it cut. Curtis refused. Powell backed him up. For days, the film sat in limbo while Warner Bros. Debated whether to release it with the scene intact or demand reshoots. Finally, they compromised. They kept the scene, but trimmed it, cutting away just before Powell's grip tightens. You see the anger in his eyes, you see his hands move, but you don't see the violence, just the threat of it. And somehow, that made it even more powerful. At number 15. The film opened in October 1933 to packed theaters and rave reviews. Variety called it the best detective film ever made. The New York Times praised Powell's performance as definitive. Box office numbers soared. Warner Bros. Immediately started planning sequels, more Philo Vance mysteries, a whole franchise. And then nothing happened. Powell moved on to other projects. Curtis got assigned to different films. The studio lost interest. By 1934, the Philo Vance series had moved to other actors, other directors, and none of them captured what the Kennel Murder Case had. Some film historians believe it's because the film was too good. It set a standard the studio couldn't maintain. Others think it was timing, that the enforcement of the production code made it impossible to recreate the film's darker tone. But the simplest explanation might be that lightning doesn't strike twice. Everything that made the Kennel Murder Case special, the speed, the style, the chemistry between Powell and Curtis, the perfect storm of talent and timing, it couldn't be replicated. It could only be experienced once. And when audiences tried to chase that high with later Philo Vance films, they were disappointed. Not because those films were bad, but because they weren't the Kennel Murder Case. They were just mysteries. And this film was something more. Number 16. Decades after its release, the Kennel Murder Case became a teaching tool. Film schools studied Curtis's camera work. Mystery writers analyzed the plot structure. Acting coaches showed Powell's performance to demonstrate restraint and timing. The film was dissected frame by frame, becoming more famous as an artifact than it ever was as entertainment. But something strange happened in the process. The mystery stopped mattering. Students focused on technique, on craft, on how Curtis moved the camera, or how Powell delivered lines. They forgot to watch it as a story. They forgot to let themselves be surprised. And when you watch the Kennel Murder Case as a puzzle to be solved, rather than an experience to be enjoyed, it loses something essential. The magic, the thrill of not knowing, the pleasure of being fooled by someone smarter than you. Film professors love to explain why the film works, breaking down its mechanics like a watchmaker disassembling a clock. But in doing so, they sometimes forget that the point of a clock isn't to understand how it works. It's to tell time. And the point of the Kennel Murder Case isn't to appreciate Curtis's craftsmanship or Powell's technique. It's to sit in the dark, watch a locked room, and try to figure out how the impossible became real. Everything else is just commentary. Number 17. In 1940, Warner Bros. Remade the film as Calling Philo Vance with James Stevenson in the lead role. They updated the setting, rewrote the dialogue, changed character names. And it was terrible. Not because Stevenson was bad, he was fine, but because the remake missed the point entirely. It moved slower, it explained more, it held the audience's hand through every clue, every revelation, making sure no one got confused. And in doing so, it sucked out all the energy that made the original special. Critics panned it, audiences ignored it, Warner Bros. Quietly buried it, and for years, Calling Philo Vance was considered one of the worst detective films of the 1940s. But here's the strange part. The remake's failure actually helped the original. It reminded people that the Kennel Murder Case wasn't just good for its time. It was good, period. You couldn't improve it by making it clearer, or slower, or more accessible. Those weren't improvements, they were dilutions. The original worked because it was fast, confusing, challenging. It treated audiences like adults capable of keeping up, and when the remake tried to dumb it down, it proved that some films are perfect as they are. They don't need updates. They don't need modernization. They just need to be watched, appreciated, and left alone. Number 18. William Powell never forgot the Kennel Murder Case. Years later, when he was starring in the Thin Man series, he'd occasionally reference Philo Vance in interviews, calling it the role that taught him how to play a detective. He said Vance was harder to play than Nick Charles because Vance had no warmth, no humor, just cold intellect. Nick Charles could joke his way through a murder investigation. Philo Vance had to solve it with pure deduction. And Powell, who was naturally charming and funny, had to suppress those instincts to play Vance convincingly. It was acting by subtraction, taking away everything that made him likable and leaving only the mind. He called it one of the most difficult performances of his career, not because the dialogue was hard or the scenes were complex, but because he had to disappear, to let Philo Vance exist without William Powell's personality getting in the way. And he succeeded so completely that some viewers actually disliked him in the role. They found Vance cold, arrogant, insufferable, which meant Powell had done his job perfectly. Because Philo Vance was all those things. He wasn't supposed to be likable. He was supposed to be right, and Powell understood that distinction better than any actor who ever played the character. Number 19. The film's legacy isn't measured in awards or box office numbers. It's measured in influence. Every locked room mystery that came after, from Agatha Christie adaptations to modern crime thrillers, owes something to the Kennel Murder Case. The way it presented clues, the way it structured revelations, the way it made the impossible seem logical in hindsight. Christie herself reportedly saw the film and loved it, calling it the best adaptation of a detective novel she'd ever seen, even though it wasn't her novel. Mystery writers studied it, filmmakers copied it, and audiences kept rediscovering it, generation after generation, because the film proved something important. A mystery doesn't need action or spectacle to be thrilling. It just needs a good puzzle, a smart detective, and the courage to trust that audiences will follow along. No explosions, no car chases, no romantic subplots to pad the runtime. Just a locked room, a dead body, and 73 minutes to figure out how it happened. In an era where detective films were becoming increasingly elaborate, the Kennel Murder Case went the opposite direction. It stripped everything away except the mystery itself, and somehow, that made it more powerful than any of its contemporaries. Number 20. By the 1950s, the film had disappeared. Not literally, but culturally. Television had arrived, and old detective films felt antiquated, slow, irrelevant. The Kennel Murder Case stopped playing in theaters, stopped showing up on TV, stopped being discussed. For nearly 2 decades, it existed only in archives, a forgotten relic from Hollywood's early sound era. And then, in the 1970s, something unexpected happened. Film preservation societies started screening pre-code films, showing audiences what Hollywood was like before censorship sanitized everything. And the Kennel Murder Case roared back to life. Suddenly, people who'd never heard of Philo Vance were watching the film and being stunned by how modern it felt, how fast, how uncompromising. Critics who'd dismissed 1930s detective films as stuffy and theatrical had to reconsider, because this film wasn't stuffy. It was kinetic, visual, alive. The rediscovery turned the Kennel Murder Case into a cult classic, studied and celebrated by a whole new generation. Not as a historical curiosity, but as a genuinely great film that happened to be made 90 years ago. And that's the ultimate weird fact. A movie that was forgotten became more relevant than films that never left the public consciousness. Because great mysteries don't age. They just wait patiently for the right audience to find them again. Bonus. Fact. Most people don't know this, but there's a lost scene. During production, Curtis filmed an alternate ending where Philo Vance himself was revealed to be complicit in covering up a secondary crime. Not the murder, but something else. Something that would have complicated his character, made him morally ambiguous. The scene was fully shot, edited into an early cut, and shown to test audiences. They hated it. They wanted Vance to be the hero, untouchable, incorruptible. Warner Bros. Cut the scene immediately, and the footage was never seen again. For decades, it was believed destroyed, lost to time like so many other deleted scenes from the 1930s. But in 2019, a film collector in London discovered a canister of unmarked nitrate film in an estate sale. Inside was 6 minutes of footage from the Kennel Murder Case, including the lost ending. The collector donated it to the Academy Film Archive, where it was restored, digitized, and studied. And the strangest thing, the scene actually works. It's dark, unexpected, but it makes Philo Vance human in a way the theatrical version never did. Warner Brothers still won't restore it to the film, claiming it would violate the original release. But you can watch it online if you know where to look. 6 minutes that change everything you thought you knew about the most famous detective you've never heard of.